Hey y'all, I'm Mayer Cunningham, the special education boss. If you've ever felt confused, overwhelmed, or just plain frustrated at the 504 IEP table, you are in the right place. Every week, I'm breaking down the rules, the rights, and the realities of special education so you can walk into meetings informed, empowered, and ready to make real change. And whether you're a parent, a teacher, an advocate, a school-based member, or somebody who's just trying to do right by a student, this podcast gives you straight talk, real answers, and tools that you can use immediately. I'm not here to play politics. I'm not here to play sides. I'm here to train people who sit at the table and teach you how to follow the law, ask the right questions, and protect the rights of students. So go ahead and hit subscribe, share this with a friend, and you know what? Meet me back here every single week. We're not just talking about change. We're making it. Because when you know better, you do better. And when we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody. Good evening and welcome. We are here to share concerns about a school district and their non-compliance as it relates to IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, state statutes, FERPA, and all sorts of other things. If we haven't met, I'm Mayer Cunningham, special education boss, training everyone that sits at the 504 IEP table to navigate and negotiate successful student outcomes. And so today I'm going to read you a letter from a past employee, a whistleblower, that wants the story told. I've interviewed her several times. She's a wonderful young lady. She's gone from the district now. But what has occurred has not only impacted her as an educator, as a very good educator, the students in her classroom, the support staff, leadership, district administration, principals, special education chair, and a student that I advocate for and have advocated for years. And so we're withholding her name because she's moving forward in other proceedings, but this is the letter that she wrote me that I could share with you. So in light of several violations of FERPA and IDEA that occurred during my employment at Fort Bend ISD, and so these occurred during the 2024-2025 school year. These concerns involve the district's mishandling of special education protocols, student privacy, which ultimately led to efforts to shift blame onto me as the educator. One of my primary concerns involved in the district's failure to ensure that inclusion support teachers attended professional learning community meetings, PLC meetings. This lack of participation meant that these inclusion teachers often entered classrooms unprepared, unaware of lesson plans, unable to provide necessary modifications and/or accommodations. This practice placed the full burden of accommodations and modifications on the classroom teacher, which is a violation of IDEA requirements. At the beginning of the school year, the district administration came to us, to the school in a meeting, and instructed all of the teachers who had this particular student not to communicate directly with the student's guardian, describing the guardian as litigious and difficult to satisfy. Despite this warning, within a month of August of 2024, I had an email encounter with the guardian of the student regarding an assignment that the student needed to be retested on. I found the guardian to be reasonable, respectful, and generally interested in their child's education, which absolutely contradicted the district's characterization. It left me questioning why district communication was so discouraged, and even when it was positive and constructive. In the same period, during the same time period, I took it upon myself to provide the necessary accommodations and modifications for the student, responsibilities that should have been handled by the inclusion teacher. Upon realizing that this added to my workload, I approached the assistant principal at the campus to request that the inclusion support teacher fulfill their role as required under TEA regulations, IDEA, by attending PLC meetings and preparing appropriate modifications. Shortly after raising these concerns, I began to feel targeted for simply advocating for proper compliance and support for students with disabilities who required accommodations and modifications. Additionally, there were incidents in which sensitive student information was inappropriately discussed with the teachers that taught the student. For example, I was informed by the school leadership of confidential details related to not only to the legal action taken by the student's guardian against the school district in filings, but also the specific amount of money offered in the settlement agreement and the concerns of the guardian that might continue to pursue further action. This disclosure of detailed sensitive information, including a monetary amount, is highly inappropriate. It violates all standards of mediation and is a clear breach of FERPA violations and guidelines. A separate and serious FERPA violation occurred when I was provided with an IEP of another student I did not even teach. This document was sent to me after I was no longer serving even as a classroom teacher within Fort Bend ISD. The IEP was completely unredacted, and I was able to see the student's full name and personal details. This demonstrates a troubling lack of safeguarding student privacy and constitutes a direct violation of FERPA. Thank you for your support in giving a voice to us so we can share these important issues. So I want to go over a few of the problems that are going on here in Fort Bend ISD. So this student I advocate for and have advocated for years. We have had state filings with Fort Bend ISD. We've had a due process hearing with Fort Bend ISD. The parent prevailed partially in that decision by a state hearing officer. And then we appealed decision for a complete relook at the issues in the district Fifth Circuit Appellate Court, and it's there now. So when this general ed teacher, who this is from, a general ed teacher, talks about the inclusion teacher, so the inclusion teacher is the person providing special education services. So the general ed teacher is the general ed teacher. The special ed teacher is the case manager and or the special ed staff that comes into the room to support kids with disabilities. So that person is the one that delivers the modifications and accommodations, not the general ed teacher. So if those persons aren't available to be at the professional learning time, have access to the IEP, or given directives on how to modify and provide specially designed instruction, it just doesn't occur. Additionally, the district called a meeting with all of the teachers that taught this student that I advocate for, and told them that when the guardian of the student emails the teacher to ignore it, just to ignore that. And that after a second email or a second communication, then just direct it to the district level and they would respond on behalf, because this guardian was too difficult to deal with and was never satisfied. Additionally, they disclosed financial information that was part of a conversation during an ongoing legal matters that occurred inside of a mediation. And so I don't know if you know this, but whatever occurs inside of mediation, conversations, offers, services, supports, finances, interventions for a student with a disability that might resolve an issue, all of those conversations and all those components are confidential. They cannot be discussed with anybody outside of that mediated agreement time. And sometimes when you finish a mediation, we come to a mediated agreement, but often we don't come to an agreement. And so when you leave a mediation, the two things that you can say is we either settled or we didn't settle. And so when this general ed teacher reached out to me and told me of how horrific my client was being treated, which was not lost on us. We can figure out when you send an email and people don't respond, but that actually that the general ed teachers were being manipulated and directed by the special education chair and the principal at the campus. It's unconscionable. It's educator misconduct. And of course, certainly we're going to move forward in my client's legal options. But the fact that that would be something that Fort Bend ISD would think is a good idea is unbelievable. These are children with disabilities who you receive state funding for, federal funding for, and have an obligation to implement the IEP with fidelity. This retaliation, which we already have open retaliation cases against Fort Bend ISD, which are open right now with the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights. We're not going to lay down and take this. And I'm always here to give people a voice for injustice and inequity. That will never be okay with me, whether people like that or don't like this. But if this was happening to you, if this was happening to your child in a very big school district like Fort Bend ISD, would you be quiet or would you stand up and say something? Because students with disabilities are waiting for us to stand up and say something. So I just want to thank this teacher for reaching out to me. Additionally, today, I got another phone call from a Fort Bend ISD employee that has been an employee for 7 years, that has done an amazing job and was treated just as horrifically and run out of town. We'll be bringing her interview once her filing is complete shortly. But people have a right to be treated correctly. People have a right to share their concerns with HR, even in a school district. And one of the most egregious things that I hear from educators all the time is that their hands are tied. We know that teachers, special educators, paraprofessionals, aides are doing everything they can from sunup to sundown to serve kids with disabilities. And it's unfortunate that some school districts like Fort Bend ISD feel quite comfortable, telling it on a mountain about how illegal their practices are. And so I will keep giving this a voice. This is not one person in the district. It's many people in Fort Bend ISD. It's not a secret. We're going to keep talking about it till it's rectified, not just for the families that I serve, but for every family that lives in Fort Bend ISD, has a student in Fort Bend ISD, they are employed by Fort Bend ISD, and has a child with a disability in Fort Bend ISD. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you guys in the next training. Hit subscribe, share this with a friend, and you know what? Meet me back here every single week. We're not just talking about change, we're making it. Because when you know better, you do better. And when we get it right for the child, we get it right for everybody.